All right. This is another story from Wise Words. It'll touch some of you who've been enjoying them. This one is called Robin and the Master's Wife. Once upon a time, there's a young man named Robin who served a great prince. The prince lived in a mansion with many rooms and passageways and owned much land. Robin had the charge of all of his master's gardens and lands. Day after day, he rode from one end of the estate to the other, making sure that everyone and everything was working. When a mule died, the master sent Robin to market with a bag of silver to buy another, and Robin returned with most of the silver, as well as a fine new mule. At the beginning of each month, the prince sent Robin to collect rent from the peasants who worked the fields. If some of the rent was missing, Robin would have to pay the difference himself. But of course, none was ever missing. On the master's estate, no servant was given more responsibility, nor was any servant more faithful than Robin. No one, that is, save the prince's very old chief steward. So after his 90th birthday, the chief steward, as many old characters in fairy tales do, died. And so the prince had to choose someone to take his place. He called Robin to his chamber along with another servant whose name was Joseph. My chief steward, who served me faithfully for many years, is dead, the master began. Now I must choose another chief steward in his place. I want a chief steward who will free me from every care for my house and my estates, so I can spend my time reading and studying and hunting. I've decided to choose one of you two as my new steward. Do you wish to help me decide whom to choose? Well, I'm quite certain that Joseph would make a fine chief steward, Robin answered quickly. He's been faithful servant for, how long has it been? Nearly 4 years? Well, it's only been 2, as you well know, Joseph answered. But Robin has been a servant much longer. It is true he knows very little about the house, its needs, or its servants, but he would be a splendid chief steward nonetheless. Well, I'm honored you hold me in such high esteem, Robin said modestly, and though Joseph has never worked in the fields, and though he might have a difficult time buying a mule from the traders of towns, he would, I'm certain, be the best chief steward in the land. Robin and Joseph went on and on for some time, giving each other compliments that did not quite sound like compliments. Enough, cried the prince. I've made my decision. Robin will be the new chief steward. Robin could scarcely believe his ears. Through all his years of service, he had had the secret ambition to be the chief steward of the prince's estates. And now his dream had come true. Well, but Joseph is right, the master's voice interrupted Robin's pleasant thought. You have never lived in the house and have much to learn. Come, I will show you around and explain your duties. At the kitchen, the prince stopped and said, Whatever you wish to eat from the kitchen, it is yours. Whatever food or drink you wish to buy in preparation for my feast, you may buy. He showed Robin the garden in the central courtyard and said, I give you all the flowers and plants to decorate the house and lawns as you desire. He presented Robin before the guards and the servants and said, You are in charge of them all. After showing Robin everything in his house, the prince said, You will rule it all. I give it all into your hands as my chief steward. But the prince's jolly face became very serious. You may never go into the west wing. That is forbidden to all servants, and it is your job to make sure no one else goes into the west wing either. You must guard it even with your life. I wonder what's in the west wing. Robin took up his duties as chief steward with great energy. Fields and farmlands he knew well, and he quickly mastered the difficult jobs of managing the most stubborn household servants, of buying enough food and drink to satisfy everyone, but not so much that it spoiled, and of keeping track of how the prince's every penny was being spent. The first feast he prepared as chief steward was declared by Lord Andrew of Bostwich the most imaginative feast ever given in the eastern provinces. Because he made wide purchases, Robin was able to save a good deal of the master's money, With what he saved, Robin had the broken stones of one of the towers repaired. He hired skilled workmen to carve cunning designs into the tall front door, and wise craftsmen to cast two majestic bronze pillars set on either side of the entrance. One day, Robin was hurrying down one of the halls. He saw the master's beautiful wife peering at him around the corner of the west wing. Through all of his years as a servant, Robin had seen the prince's wife only a few times, and only from a great distance. On this occasion, he was close enough to sense the sweet warmth of her perfume and to look into her eyes, which sparkled like the silver fish hook that dangled from the end of her long necklace. Robin stopped and stared. Her beauty was so startling that Robin had to gasp for breath. His master's wife smiled and lowered her eyelids. Then, laughing loudly, she turned, and silk skirts rustling behind her, entered the room and closed the door. After that day, Robin's heart was full of the beauty of the master's wife, and he found many reasons to walk past the west wing. One day, after looking all around to make sure he was not watched, Robin tiptoed up the main hallway of the west wing, listening intently at each door. Behind the third door, he heard the voices of two ladies, one of which he recognized as belonging to the master's wife. He could not understand her words, but he was enchanted by her smooth and soothing voice and captivated by her robust laughter. Some days later, Robin chanced to be walking through the central garden in the courtyard of the prince's home. As he stepped into the garden, he noticed the master's wife, sitting on a stone bench wearing a red dress. A fragile, net-like scarf hung from her neck over her heart. When Robin went to her, she looked up and smiled. "I've been watching you," she said sweetly. "I sit at my window watching you through the lattice whenever you ride away." I've been watching you too." Robin could hardly believe it was he who spoke. I followed you through the streets of town. Oh, sorry, it's the wife speaking. "I followed you through the streets of town when you go to buy wine. And I dreamed of you." Robin felt he was dreaming even now. The master's away today, isn't he?" Robin heard his voice ask the question, but immediately wished he had said nothing. She laughed at his embarrassment. "Yes, bird hunting or something. Everyone went with him. There's no one in the house, no one at all." She straightened the skirt of her dress. "I love red. It is a delight to the eyes, don't you think?" And she laughed again. Before Robin had a chance to agree, the master's wife caught him by the hand. Her slender fingers held his wrist like chains. She whispered in his ear, "I came to the garden hoping to meet you, and now we are together. Let's go to my chambers. You've never been to my chambers, have you? I've made special preparations today. My couch is spread with silk and linen coverings. My room smells of myrrh and cinnamon. Come with me." Robin tried to pull away. I've served my master for many years. I've never disobeyed him. He's been generous and good to me. He has given all he has into my charge, but I do not want. I don't want to. He told me not to. "But you do want to, don't you?" she asked. Robin made a half-hearted attempt to flee. Tightening her grip on his wrist, she asked, "Did not my master give you all he has into your hands? Is it fair that he withheld me from you? He will not be home for many days. He will never know." Robin looked into her sparkling eyes, smiling dumbly like an ox. Robin followed her into her chambers in the west wing. The master's wife closed the door quietly behind them, turned, threw her arms around Robin's neck, and kissed him. And Robin kissed her too. And while they were still in their embrace, there was a pounding at the door, and a thundering voice of the master. "Robin, are you in there?" Robin looked everywhere for a place to hide, and finally jumped under the silk covering on the couch. It was a stupid place to hide. But before he could escape, the master's wife, laughing loudly, opened the door, and her husband, dressed in black, stormed in like a thundercloud. "What are you doing here?" he demanded of Robin. Robin rolled off the couch and stood up, holding the silk in front of him as if it would protect him from the prince's wrath. Your wife, sir, she tempted me and led me in here he said with a trembling voice. I told you not to go into the west wing. You are supposed to guard this wing. You are supposed to guard her. I gave you everything you could want. I withheld only my wife from you, and now this? The prince's round, merry face was aflame with anger, and his voice was like a clap of thunder. If you had stolen from me, I would understand. But this, you have no sense at all. Robin knelt before the prince, hoping for mercy, but the prince was not in the mood to forgive. Curse you, the prince thundered at his wife. Then to Robin he bellowed, Curse you too, you will pay for this, you will pay dearly. The prince called his guards, who seized Robin and led him to the guard in the central courtyard. Sweat moistened Robin's forehead as he sat watching the guards kindle a roaring fire. When the fire had burned down to flickering coals, the master appeared. Take off your shirt, he commanded. As Robin stood and began to pull off his shirt, he noticed the prince was holding a whip made of twisted branches from a thorn tree. Bend over and hold the bench, the prince ordered. 39 stinging blows fell on Robin's back. Now remove your boots, the prince ordered. Trembling like a leaf in the wind, Robin did as his master commanded. Do you think you can walk on hot coals and not be burned? The master asked. Robin stared but said nothing. We shall see then, walk across the coals. At first, Robin did not believe the prince was serious, but a glance in his master's eyes told him this was no joking matter. Feeling as if he were dreaming, Robin put a toe into the bed of hot coals and quickly pulled it back. Walk, walk, the master shouted. 2 guards came beside Robin, grasped his wrists like chains, and pulled him toward the fire. Stumbling, his feet pressed onto the glowing coals. When he got to the other side, he sank to his knees. His feet were black and blistered, his mind scorched with pain. The master threw his boots at him. Now go, never return to this house. You are cast out forever. Limping, Robin left the gate, stumbled through the carved door, and past the tall bronze pillars. He glanced behind him and saw 2 guards stationed at the door to prevent his return. As he walked down the lane away from the house, he thought the wind carried to his ear the sound of a woman's laughter. The moral from Proverbs chapter 7. Keep from the evil woman, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. Do not desire her beauty in your heart, nor let her catch you with her eyelids. For on account of the harlot, one is reduced to a loaf of bread. An adulteress hunts for precious life. Proverbs 7, verses 24 and 26. Wow, that story was it was a gripping story. It sounds like Robin's this great guy at the beginning, and then Robin lets us down, right? And know that, I understand I'm reading this to 5th graders. The story isn't going to go too far, to a spot we wouldn't want to read. But there's some really, there's some Bible stories that probably came to your mind as you read this story. The 2 that come to my mind are one is Joseph. Jacob's son, who was a slave in Egypt. Remember, he works for Potiphar, and Potiphar's wife tries to tempt him. This story is almost like what if Joseph had fallen to that temptation? And think about it. God had big plans for Joseph. God saved everyone in Egypt by and in a lot of that parts of the world through Joseph. Falling into temptation would have changed that. And then is my old, when we talk about this story in college, my Old Testament professor said that Potiphar probably knew his wife was somewhat to blame, because if it really was all Joseph's fault, Potiphar would have had Joseph killed right away. Killing a slave, not a big deal in Egypt at that point. but the fact that he puts him in prison, and the prison for all the super rich important people shows that Potiphar had some serious mercy on Joseph. The other story that probably came to mind was Adam and Eve in the garden, right? God gives them fruit of every tree. It's all theirs to take care of. So in this story, the Robin is represented by us, by humanity, who falls into temptation and tries to blame someone else when he does fall into temptation. And he's cast out. There's really, the author does a great job. Let's see. Peter Lythart is the author who wrote these wonderful stories. He does a really good job with some imagery too. Right? Think about, what is the prince's wife wearing? Right? She's wearing a fish hook, a necklace with a fish hook, and then she's wearing a scarf that looks like a net. Right? It's like she's catching Robin. You can see that. But that's this is an important lesson for us to stay away from. Don't go chasing after people based on looks, or just the way because you're infatuated with them. That can lead to ruin. What does the prince say? You thought you could walk on hot coals and not be burned, right? Coveting leads to sin. That's why, as we talked about in some of the religion lessons, having the attitude of gratitude is the way to go. All right, have a great day, guys. We'll see you later.